So let's take an example of applying these transformations, right? So what I want to do now is I want to graph the function y equals -2 quantity x minus 1 squared plus 3. Now obviously we want to do this without using a graphing calculator, and we want to do this without actually making a table, right? So can we do this without making a table? Well, let's think about all the transformations that we've learned. So what is our base function here? My base function is x squared, right? So I'm going to look at my base function. So I'm going to start with y equals x squared, right? That's my base function, right? Now I have a lot of transformations. Which one do I apply first? So this is where I would say think about, sort of your PEMDAS rule. As I'm going to start with my innermost parentheses and then move outward, right? So I'm going to look here. The first thing I do here in the parentheses is going to be subtract the 1. So I'm going to say from here, I'm going to do y minus 1 squared. Well, what does that do? Well, this moves our graph, right? It's a horizontal shift, right? And that is 1 unit to the right. Right? So this was a horizontal shift, 1 unit to the right. So now our graph has moved to our right. And then I do y equals, well, the next thing I do is multiply it by 2. And there's a reason I'm not multiplying by -2, because when I multiply by negative, it sort of reflects it over the x-axis. So I'm just first going to deal with the positive 2. So I do 2 y minus 1 squared, okay? And then this would be a vertical stretch by a factor of 2. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and reflect this. So I'm going to reflect it. So -2 y minus 1 squared, which is reflecting over the x-axis. All right, and then finally y equals -2 y minus 1 squared plus 3, which is vertical shift up by 3 units, right? So let's see how this graph would look. So what I sort of started doing here is I've already given, so this is your graph y equals -2 x minus 1 squared plus 3. So what we decided was the first thing we're going to apply, so this is my base function x squared, right? That's what it looks like. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to shift this graph, right? Look at the vertex. The vertex has sort of shifted here by 1 point to the right, right? So this one here has sort of shifted here now. And so I'm going to go ahead and do this one. So now my graph got shifted to the right by 1 unit. Then we said we're going to multiply it by 2 and we're going to shrink it, right? This graph, the green graph here, the final one, looks a lot thinner now than the other two. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply it by 2 and it sort of gets shrunk here, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and hide the other ones so that it's clearer. Of course, now our orientation needs to change because the graph that we have right now is facing upward, it's opening upward, whereas the final graph opens downward. So now this is where I multiply it by the -2 and I get a reflection over the x-axis. And then all I need to do here now is I have this graph which I need to shift up by 3 units. So I go ahead and add a 3 and you see that this just became a little darker. I'm going to do that again, right? This just became a little darker and we see that our function now is the same as the function over here.